welcome back to another episode of the Buffalo Happy Hour. Mike, what's going on?
Derek, we are not stateside. We are actually in the gin tasting room at Clonakilty Distillery, and we have a new friend that we wanted to bring on our show because she's also from the States, which she can touch and dive into, but there's so much to talk about, not only of what's in front of us, but also what you offer your audience, essentially, and your customers. So you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Okay, I'm Irene Tan from Connecticut, owner of Canterbury Liquors and Whiskey Mentors. And I'm here to buy more barrels of Clonic Guilty.
So what was your first impression when Clonic Guilty came to your store to kind of sell you on their product?
So I was in the process of buying a whole bunch of different barrels already, and when they showed up, it was going to be my second Irish whiskey barrel. My first one was Newport Castle, 12 years. So I tasted them, and they were at 100 proof, and I was like, I'm kind of not feeling the 100 proof because I like things most of my barrels are cask strength. So I said, there was a port cask finish, a rum cask finish, and a sherry finish, and I said, can you, the red wine finish. So I said, can you bring me the cask strength ones instead? Because I'm not feeling these. And so a couple months later, they brought back the cask strength ones. And then now I'm like, oh crap, now I really like these. So how many do I buy? And I was like, all right, I really like the port cask, but I also really like the River Salt cask. So my manager, Jen, who works with me, has a great palate also. We always taste things together. And she's like, I like this one better. I go, I like this one. I said, well, why can't we buy both? so that's what we did. We bought both. And I named them. I name all my single barrels are always named. Sometimes it's the mood I'm in when I drink the whiskey. Sometimes it's what flavors are coming through. So the first one was called Christmas Cake. That was a River Salt cask because it had a lot of those kind of Christmas spices and stuff like that, had a nice sweetness to it. And then the second one was the port cask finish, and I named that one the Queen's Jam because when I taste my barrels, after I pick them, usually I name them the next day or the day after, whatever, first thing in the morning. Early, don't brush your teeth, just have some water and then taste it, because that's when I feel like my palate's the cleanest. And I can taste all the different notes. And I got like some, kind of jammy fruit, like a boysenberry, fruit in the back. So I go, yep, call it the Queen's Jam.
That's an interesting way to go about it, to taste it in the morning. Mm-hmm. I guess I never really thought about that. And I don't know if my boss would appreciate me doing it before work, but I mean, I could try it.
But
for
you're
research.
Tasting it though, right? You're tasting it rather you're not drinking it.
Right.
So literally it's like, like a 1 ml, 2 ml squirt from the sample, and then it's all about just tasting it when your palate is really clean. You try not to eat something super spicy the night before, nothing that will kind of jam up your palate. And then that quick taste, and then and usually when you first wake up, you got a pretty clear mind, nothing else to distract you, and that's when I feel like I name my barrels the best. But every once in a while, I'll be out in the distillery, and something about that barrel will call out to me, and I'll name it right there and then. I just did that with a Kings County barrel. We went down, I think it was maybe a month and a half ago, and there were 5 barrel samples, and to prove that I don't always buy high proof, I taste it blind. I go low proof to high proof, let me taste them. And I loved the first one, which was lowest proof, and I loved the last one, which was the highest proof. It's basically a hazmat. It's 148.6 or something crazy like that. But so I said, I really like that one. If I can have 2 barrels, I buy both. Obviously, they were limited, so I could only get one. So that last one that we tasted, I mean, just smelling it already, I was like, wow, I know I'm going to buy this one. And shortly after we tasted it, we kind of looked at each other and said, Cupcake. That's what we're going to name it, because it had it's like you walked into a bakery that only makes cupcakes. They don't bake anything else. And it's that sweetness, that confectionery sweetness was what we got in the nose, and then icing on the cupcake was the mouthfeel. So kind of crazy.
Yeah. So did you learn all that? Because you have an education in whiskey, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about how you know so much and how your barrel picks are actually good?
Well, they tell me they're really good because by how quickly they sell. So so whiskey school is more it's a marketing school, right? The whiskey school in Austin, love it. It's definitely a marketing school. They teach you every aspect of kind of how to market. So yes, we do taste a whole bunch of whiskey there and try to blind taste and figure out what it is and stuff like that. But it just takes a lot of practice. But ultimately, you have to be born with a palate for this and a nose. And I call it the nose from hell because I smell everything. I can smell something that's, somebody could have walked in here with a certain perfume, and half an hour later I come in and I'm like, somebody was in here who stunk up my tasting room. It's kind of how it is. So I'm like, when you come to my tasting, please don't wear any smells. So very, very sensitive. So to a point where, if it stays in there, I just have to I can't do this.
Sure.
It's hard to kind of reset your nose when it fills the air. But as far as tasting stuff, I do a lot of blind tasting. So I did. Well, now I'm constantly tasting stuff. And literally, when I talk about tasting stuff, we do that little bit and that's it, because you don't need that much. And you can't overtaste, because I'd say probably my max is maybe 20 barrels for a day, and that's it, or 15 to 20, depending on how high the proofs are, because after that, your palate's just shot. You can't really taste it anymore. So I do a lot of blinds so that I kind of try to pick out what I'm tasting. Because when you look at a bottle, you go, oh, I know that looks pretty, that's going to taste. You already have a preconceived idea of what you're going to taste. But when you taste blind, the first round for me is always not blind, so that I have, and I do notes in a little spreadsheet, basically. Totally geeky about it that way. This is what I'm tasting in this bottle, blah, 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 blah. And then the second round is basically not looking, and then just picking up a glass and tasting and going, okay, I'm tasting these notes. Does it match anything that's in there? And go, yep, that one matches from what I can taste, and then that belongs back to that bottle. So that it's just training and having discipline to do that, and not going, oh, this is a fun tasting thing. No, it's not really it's really not fun. Yeah. Right? It's work.
Absolutely.
So you said in Austin for whiskey school.
Yep.
And then you're also an executive bourbon steward, which is the second or third completion in
the second yep.
for Moonshine University out of Kentucky. Okay, gotcha. So at your store, which is located in Connecticut, anybody can essentially walk in and then ask to do a tasting with you. It's just scheduled, correct?
Yep.
So what started that entire process? Was it just because you thought that it was a good way to continue your own training as well on the outside?
So it's not so much for me at that point. At that point, it's more of educating my customer, right? So in the tasting room, so our store proper is about 1,000 square feet. It's a small store, but every spot in the house, in the store is filled. Every shelf is filled with a bottle. Most bottles have to fight for a space. So we have a tasting room next door that we acquired during COVID, and it's turned into basically a barrel room. I mean, it's like a barrel, kind of line the walls and stuff like that. And so during COVID, it was difficult to taste in the retail space.
Sure.
Because it was illegal to taste. But in a private event, you could technically do it.
Yeah.
Because people walking in the store wouldn't know that this was happening, because it's like almost like a little speakeasy. You kind of walk through the back, and there's this little door that you walk through around on the other side. So, thank you.
Of course.
You guys know about these glasses, right?
We do, yeah. Decanter abilities, which I'm glad we're getting on camera, because it's fascinating. So
I always like to taste in my own glass. I love how this glass, if I'm going to just drink for fun, I will drink out of this.
Yeah.
When I'm buying a barrel, I don't go to a distillery without a 6-pack of these or more, because the bigger glasses, to me, especially the high proof, throw so much alcohol in your nose that you kind of trashes it trashes my nose when I do that. But with this, it restricts how much alcohol can come out, but yet it concentrates all the notes that I need to pick out of the whiskey.
You just get those on Amazon?
No, this is Distillery Products. They sell mostly to distilleries, and they don't kind of just sell to mom and pop shops. So I kind of buy this by the case, by cases. There's 72 to a case. During my charity events, I usually buy 2-3 cases of it.
Sure.
Actually, now we're up to 180 people, so yeah, quite a few cases of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we use this every year at a charity event. We do I do like a special saying on it, so people can collect these. right? So it's $10. Don't make really a profit on it. It's more so that I don't have to keep track of the glasses,
Sure.
right? So the first year was this, it said sip slowly. The second year was a better sip. I don't know what I'm going to call it this year yet. But back to your question about the events. I started doing these events in my first store in Brooklyn. It was Brooklyn Northeast Wines and Spirits, because I felt like people buy a bottle because they think it looks pretty, right? And then they're like, oh man, it didn't taste so good. Whereas I'm like, I'm gonna kind of, take the prettiness out of the picture, kind of the marketing out of the picture, so to speak, and actually taste the stuff. So if I'm pouring for you, sometimes I'll do a thing where I'll pour just in brown bags, and you tell me what you like best, which is really kind of cool, because then all of a sudden people are like, oh man, I really didn't like that. I won't name some whiskeys that are very popular and very highly sought after, and they don't taste so good, because I will most likely sneak one of those into the batch. And that's all by educating the customers to say, buy by what you taste, right? And in my tasting room, there are no prices. And people always go, well, what does this cost? What does that cost? I'm like, can we really talk about price after? Because the whole idea of coming to tasting room is for the tasting experience, right? Because I'm trying to discover what you like. You say, well, I don't like rye, I don't like whatever. And then my challenge for me is always, I'll make sure you haven't had the right rye.
Right.
And typically people go home with 2 or 3 ryes and they're like shocking themselves. I'm like, there you go. And so it's a lot about education more than anything else.
Which is interesting because it's not a shameless plug at this point. We're obviously inside of their building in a different country. When we first sat down with Clonic Guilty, we didn't know what their price point was because we had no idea what the brand was, period. They were the first liquor store to have them in the States and in New York. And we're like, all right, cool, let's do it. So when we started sitting down and drinking the juice, it was funny because the packaging comes with each bottle. We saw the branding and we were instantly saying like, this has to be $60 to $70 a bottle. Like, look at it. And then we found out that it's less than $50 a bottle generally. And we were just like unbelievably blown away. And it was just really cool that you can get something so pure with such a great backstory and message behind it, and you're not breaking the bank.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot of bottles out of Kentucky, to your point, where it's name or whatever it is, and then when you actually try to enjoy it, you're like, it tastes the same. It's almost too much corn, or I just don't understand this mash bill combo. Like, why are they doing it that way with the percentages? And then you go to something like this, and you're just like, oh, barley's a really good grain to use.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we were even talking before we pressed record about how some people are turned off by Irish whiskey in general.
Yes.
So putting it in a brown bag where you don't even know that it's Irish whiskey, you taste it. If you taste this, you're not saying, oh, this is easily Irish whiskey. It's the notes and the flavor profile in here are that of, like, it's not specific to Ireland to me. And that's why if you just throw that in front of somebody and say, just taste it and try to pick out the notes, people are going to fall in love with it.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's funny because my intro to Clonakilty was not in Connecticut. I was in Florida at the time of vacation. And, it's kind of sad that liquor store owners go on vacation and visit other liquor stores. They just do. So I found this shop that had a whole bunch of different whiskeys and stuff. And everything that was, from certain distilleries completely overpriced, which I completely bypassed. And in the corner, I saw this Irish whiskey. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool packaging. And it was $30. I was like, I'm gonna have to take one of those home. So I did, and went back to the hotel, and then I was like, this is really good. So I went back and bought a few more bottles. And that was my introduction to Clonic Guilty. So I was pretty excited because I came back to Connecticut, and I said to my distributor, I go, which one of you carries this? And apparently somebody was working to carry it in Connecticut, and that's how we got it.
That's amazing.
Really kind of neat, yeah.
So we have a tasting in front of us. Do you want to walk us through a tasting and how you normally do it at your store?
Okay, sure. So normally, when I mostly try to do it blind, I try to not tell you anything about it. I was just kind of looking to see what you had poured. But so the double oak. So how I usually tell people is that your very first sip should be the smallest sip ever, right? Because if it's obviously that's not a high proof whiskey, but super high proof whiskey, if you take a big gulp, or if you shoot it back, then that will be my last pour for you. I will have the most horrible thing that's on the bottom for your next pour, so you don't come back. So the first sip should be the smallest sip ever to just introduce the whiskey to your palate. And then the second sip, you should take a bigger sip, but not as big a sip as a normal sip. And then you want to let that whiskey go all over your palate, your sides of your mouth, your tongue, the front and back, and then just sort of experience what you're tasting in different parts, because you'd be surprised. that sometimes spice only shows up on one side of the tongue and not the other, right? And then you want to look for, is the whiskey sort of filling all parts of your palate, which to me implies a really well-balanced whiskey, right? I mean, you want to nose it, but you can't nose it that much because your nose gets pretty tired very quickly, right?
Sure.
So you do want to nose it to see whether, there are notes there that are of interest to you. So, and I never try to tell you what you should be nosing, because if I say, oh, I smell apple, and they go, oh, yeah, I get apple. I'm like, no, that's just part of a suggestion. Or they go, there's something there I'm smelling, and I'm not quite sure what it is. Because so nosing is so related to your experience, right? See where you grew up, what you ate, all of that comes into play. So like sometimes I'll nose like a beer or something, and I go, oh, I get tropical notes. I get some jackfruit. Most people in this country haven't had jackfruit. They're like,
Right.
They have no idea what you're talking about, right? Or I'll go, oh, I think I smell this certain. There's another fruit that's like a jackfruit, but it's not. It's called something else. And
It's a
I'm like,
dragon fruit.
There is when I go, you're full of BS.
Correct. Every time I ate dragon fruit, I could never smell it.
Exactly. There's no smell to dragon fruit, right? So even when I was in Ho Chi Minh City a few years ago, and they have really good dragon fruit over there. I mean, it's like super ripe and just really delicious. But even then, I don't ever remember smelling it and go, oh, so that's what real dragon fruit should smell like. And it's the same thing in the wine world. When people go, that has gooseberries, I go, you are full of BS too, because I grow gooseberries in my yard. And it goes from green to, the variety that I have goes from green to like a dark wine color. And even at its ripest state, because I can go downstairs and pick just one, there was still barely a note. So with my nose that can smell a litter box 3 rooms away, and me not to smell, gooseberry, when they go, that's gooseberry, and they go, yeah, now you're full of crap.
So when you do your tasting, you said you normally try to stop at about 20. Or that would be your max. What does a normal tasting consist of? Does it range between like 5 to 10, or is it...
So that would be me picking a barrel.
Oh, okay,
right.
Gotcha.
So in my store, so technically you can't taste more than 10 things. 10 bottles can't be open.
Okay.
More than 10 bottles can't be open at the same time. So it's depending on where, if you're new. So depending on your level of experience, right? If you say I've never had Scotch and I want to try Scotch, then I find things to kind of get you up to a certain level. And they're not always my barrel picks that I'm trying to sell. I'm just trying to find out what you like and how get you something that's in your comfort zone, and then take you that notch higher or sideways or whatever to say, hey, you need to kind of explore this, and that's what's really fun. And to that point, my single barrels are always just a little off. It's not the normal, because why would you buy a barrel that's just normal? Right. So mine is always just a little more extreme than it should be. But luckily, most of my customers are very tuned to that, because I will walk you through the tasting and I'll tell you why I picked that barrel, right? Because it had these notes and why I named it that. And what's fun about naming all my barrels is that when customers come back, they go, well, remember that barrel that you had that was, missed a note? And or it was the sweet hot cocoa, and then we did the blend with the whatever. So it's really nice because then you really kind of they really identify with the whole story. So you kind of own that bottle, rather than that's just a bottle that I bought. I just had. So it's about creating that experience for the customer that way, where they can be very personal with the bottle. Is
there a single barrel that was really off the wall for what you normally do?
Yes. Actually, there's quite a few.
Yes.
So I would say probably the first one that jumps to mind, off the wall in a great way, is my whistle pick, the 12-year bespoke, which was more like a 13-year. It was finished it was the lowest proof whiskey that I bought that was just tasted fantastic. It was 86 proof.
Oh, wow.
But I got a chance to taste it at the distillery when I was blending my 15-year barrel, and it was just so phenomenal. I was like, I need to have this, because Pete Lynch, who was the master blender there at the time, he's like, I never wanted to sell this barrel before, but since I met you, if you like it and you want it, it's yours. So I tasted it. I'm like, what the heck is this? So it's a Amburana wood, which is a Brazilian teak wood.
Ooh.
which is just freaking amazing. I mean, I named it Irene's Zen Barrel.
Nice.
So it is the mood I'm in when I'm drinking this, and there's just crazy notes in it. Or people who don't really like whiskey and they try it, they go, "What is this? Is this a whiskey?" It could almost be a Scotch, right? But it's 100% rye, right? But it could almost be any other whiskey out there. Was that different? It had like on the nose, it was like cedar wood, I felt like I was in Thailand when I would be drinking this, right? There's this kind of sandalwood kind of note to it, and then this coconut that comes through, which everybody goes, "What am I tasting?" And as soon as I say coconut, I go, "Yes, coconut."
Really, coconut.
Coconut, and then a little salt in the back. So you feel like you're on the beach somewhere, and drinking this thing, and this coconut trees, swaying in the wind. It's just a crazy thing. But for me, when I drink whiskey, it's not just about drinking whiskey. It puts you in an environment.
See, now, if you told me that you had a crazy off-the-wall single barrel, I think Whistle Pig would have been my last guess. That it would have came like a rye from Whistle Pig, because they're very, very good products. But to me, they're very similar in the ones that I've tried. I wouldn't have guessed that they had an off-the-wall option. I guess I'm getting at.
Yeah, so they do.
That's cool.
In their bespoke series, a bunch of different single cask finishes. The regular bespoke series, I believe, is Sauternes, Port, and Madeira. I think are the three that you can do in some. In some combination, with some limits, of course. But being offered that particular one was pretty amazing, because the rest of, and I could only buy half a barrel because the rest of it went to Boss Hog that year. So Boss Hog 7.
Oh, cool.
So I technically got baby Boss Hog, so to speak. It was really, really good. And it was fun because when Boss Hog 7 came out and I opened it and I tasted it, I was like, oh, dang. So you can definitely taste the signature in it. But we didn't sell it for, a huge amount of money, because I wanted people to have access to it. I mean, I could have sold it for over $200, and it's still what I sold. It sold out in a month. It came in the same week as my Kings County barrel, my first Kings County barrel, which was Save at the Moment. And they both sold out in the same month. Wow. Which is pretty insane. And it wasn't cheap. We're talking over $100 a bottle.
Right.
Yeah, you're flying through product.
Certain barrels literally just evaporate. As soon as I say I have them, I'm almost afraid to announce them sometimes. So my Leisure Craig barrel proof that just came in, how many months ago now? I think it was in February. And I made the mistake of not letting my manager, Jen, know that I had posted it, and the phone just rang off the hook for the next 5-6 hours. She was like, "Thank you very much." She goes, "A little warning would have been nice." And it was 132 bottles. And we closed at 7. And if we had closed at 8, the barrel would have been gone. And I was limiting people to only 6 bottles. So, ECBP is a product I think that everybody wants to get their hands on. And then being my barrel pick, so because when I went out to pick that barrel, I said to myself, it's not good enough, I'm going to walk away, all right, because I don't need a barrel. I always want a barrel, I never need a barrel. So I went out there with ECBP 119, A119, which I really, really like. So it better taste as good as that. If it's not, then I got to go. Luckily, Heaven Hill did great by me. They gave me 3 barrel samples, of which I had to choose between A and C, because A was really, really good at a low proof, younger. I think it was only like 8.5 years old. And then B was, for me, not a single barrel pick. And C was just like, dang, C is really good, but A has a really good nose. But I went with C because when I tasted A and C, I definitely like A. But when I tasted C and I went back to A, the rest is history. So C ended up being named Irene's Hug instead of the Kentucky Hug. That was my hug because it was 130 something proof, very warming, but yet so not spiky, and because that's what I found is like with high proof stuff. I don't buy high proof because it's high proof. I buy high proof because it happens to be high proof. I buy the whiskey because it tastes good, and it just happens to be high proof. So people make a mistake. They go, "Oh, the higher the proof, the better." I'm like, that's not what it's all about.
No, not at all.
So when it comes to names, you don't have to answer this if it's too soon. However, this won't go live for a little bit. Did you name any of your picks from this trip?
Not yet, because I'm still trying to decide. I'm blending 2 Sauternes barrels.
Okay.
And then the other one, I haven't decided whether I want the first one or the second one yet.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and this morning I made the mistake of having breakfast before I tasted, so I couldn't. So maybe tomorrow I might name it.
Excellent. Do you have any preconceived name ideas of like, because I know I'm in this location, then I might try to tie this into the name?
Not at all.
Okay.
So the naming is very, very random. It's when I'm tasting, wherever I'm tasting at the moment. If it hits me, then I name it that. It's kind of crazy, like I said, because it's not always about the taste, but some are very specific. Like I have a barrel pick from 2 barrel picks from Heaven's Door, and normally it's like, I don't know, it's a lot of whiskey from certain distilleries that I just don't really care for, but these 2 came out really, really nice. The first one I named Butterscotch Brittle. It was a MGP 21% rye. And you definitely get the butterscotch, and the brittle is sort of the peanut brittle kind of nutty note in the back. The second one, which was 80% corn from Tennessee. It's not from Cascade Hollow, but it's some of the distillery in Tennessee. I named that one Cherry Spice and Cigars, and you literally would get that if you tasted it. And people who smoke cigars, I'm like, you like cigars? You're gonna like this. That's all I can tell you. And people taste it. So the first, and it's pretty high proof, 125.9. The first sip is you get this big cherry notes in the back, in the front, kind of like an Elijah Craig. And then the spice is definitely in the middle. And I don't understand how it's that spicy because there's only 10% rye in there, but never mind. And then the cigar is the cigar note on the finish. You get this. Not a smoke, but more of like a cigar wrapper kind of thing. I mean, I don't smoke cigars, but from what I've smelled of them, I'm like, that's kind of what I'm getting back. So it's called Cherry Spice and Cigars. And, people who smoke cigars, which is because it's called cigars, we're just going to go, I think I need that. I go, no, you actually really do need that, which is why I put it in there, because you would appreciate it.
Sure.
Or even people who don't smoke cigars appreciate that the different, so 3 distinct notes in the whiskey, which is kind of cool. So.
Are you creating your own labels for the whiskey, or are you just slapping a sticker on it that says Cherry Spice and Cigar?
So depends on the distillery. Some distilleries are very, very picky. So they'll always make a sticker for me. Sometimes they will put it right onto the label itself. Me, I personally really don't care because true to my don't buy them pretty. Doesn't matter. It just has to somewhere on there. It has to say Whiskey Mentors. QS, which stands for Queen Select, is something that one of my customers said, you're like Queen of Whiskey. You should. I'm gonna buy you a stamp that says QS, and you need to put a wax stamp on all your bottles. I'm like, yeah, but it stuck. The Queen Select, and then there's a number after it, 2 numbers. So it would be 01, 02, whatever it is. And for me, that was for me to keep track of how many barrels I buy from that distillery. Right. So I will probably most likely by the end of this year have a QS 06 from Clonakilty. My biggest barrel right now has to be Garrison Brothers. I have a QS 18.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
and that's all tracked in a spreadsheet.
So that I don't have to track, right? Because whenever I go buy a new barrel, I already know. I mean, in our inventory system, I have all of that anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's really kind of fun for me to be able to, go to this area. I'm coming to buy, QS 07 and 8. So it's sort of a signal to them like, hey, I'm not just your, happen to just buy a barrel. I like what I'm doing and I like what you're doing. So let's, continue this relationship.
Have you ever reached a point where you're like, maybe I shouldn't get one right now because I have inventory for other single barrels? Like, have you ever hit that point, or are you just
brakes?
okay?
You're talking about brakes? That's not such
right.
thing. Brakes don't work around here.
It doesn't sound like it because you were saying what 30.
We have I think I'm almost at 72. So not a goal. It just when I was looking at how many barrels, my first year we bought 22 barrels. We opened in October of 2019, and by December of next year we had 22 barrels, which was pretty insane for a store that just opened and during the pandemic, right? Because it was difficult for people to travel to come to my store and stuff like that. But thanks to the Whiskey Try video, we were like, we gotta go to that store. But you gotta watch the video to the end, because the end is when it shows that I'm at my new location. Because the video was shot in my old store, because I thought I would have my store already, but I literally did not have keys to my store till the day the video was shot. But so be it. Makes
No
for a
worries.
cool story.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's no amount that would be too much. Is your store, so in New York, you can't sell beer at liquor stores. Can you?
We can sell all of the above.
So what does your store make up, like percentage of whiskey and then the rest of stuff?
So I would say we are very whiskey heavy.
Yeah.
Because we have an entire room, in where all the barrels are. At any time, about 20 barrels of whiskey in there. And, how many, I stopped to count how many bottles there are. Say on average of 150 bottles, plus and minus. So that's a lot of whiskey in there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and then in the retail space, we actually had to kind of have some hanging shelves made because just not enough room. And like I said, every bottle fights for a spot, so their bottles are like this so that I can fit more on there. Where a lot of other stores try to make their store look, like they have a lot of product, so they have like 3 or 4 of the same SKUs, and they're like, oh, there's a lot of product. I'm like, yeah, no, it's all the same stuff, So it's fun. It's when people come to the store, it's kind of like when we saw where the Rick House was, in at Galahad, where the lighthouse is. It's like, wow, this is really spectacular and amazing, and that's how people feel when they come to my store. They're like, holy crap, this is like a Disneyland for adults. It's
That's sweet.
Yeah, it's like a candy store for adults because there's so many things to try, and it's not just about whiskey. I mean, I do a lot of whiskey. I also do a lot of gins. I think we probably have more gin SKUs than vodka SKUs, even though vodka is still the #1 spirit sold in the world, or at least in the U.S. Yeah. Just because I don't want to be the Me Too store, I like to call it.
Sure.
Right, Me Too. I sell that at that price. I'm like, yeah, no, no, I want to do something different. I want to give the customer a different experience because. At the end of the day, the reason I do that is because life is short, right? And you want to have the best experience you can have, but that doesn't mean having a lot of money to do it or whatever it is, but being able to experience different things, right?
Sure.
And being able to offer that to people, I think it's very, very cool.
So is the single barrel process for gin the same?
Yes. It's starting to, I don't know who else has bought a single barrel gin. I know I have 2 of them. So one of them showed up just last week. Was it last week? Yeah, because I just did a charity event for the zoo. So I do a lot of charity things with whiskey because it's a cool thing to do to give back to the community and stuff. But it's a barrel aged gin from Bar Hill Distillery in Vermont. So the same trip, I try and pack in as many picks as I can in a trip because you got to pay for the trip, right?
Yeah.
So when I was up doing my Whistle Pick 15 and the Umbrana cast, I said, I can't stay over. I got to go to Bar Hill to go see these guys, right? So I went to see them, and then just in casual conversation, I said, hey, if you ever do a single barrel program, let me know. I'm definitely interested. And at the time, I was like, it'll be a while then because the pandemic hit, and I didn't hear anything. But then late last year, they said, hey, we have our samples for you for a single barrel pick. I'm like, what? This is so cool. So they brought me samples. I was like, yeah, clearly that one's the winner. And so I am the first one, and actually the only one in Connecticut, because you actually have to get on a long waiting list apparently to get the single barrels. But because I asked way early in the game, I got my barrel, and it's really, really good. Like for the people that don't like gins, like, yeah, I don't like gins. I'm like, you haven't had the right gin. Right. So invariably in the whiskey tasting, I'll go, we'll do all the whiskey. I go, wait, there's one more. There's always some surprise. And I go, well, try this. It's a gin. They're like, we don't like gin. I'm like, just humor me, right? You can pour it away. I would not, my feelings would be hurt. And it's a gin that is distilled from honey. And so it has some kind of sweet notes to it already. But then barrel aging, it just makes it more like a whiskey, right? So at my other store, when we didn't have enough room for all the gins and stuff or any of the special bottles, I'll just bring a few in at a time, and people will know as they're tasting that where is it in the store, because they don't want to go home without the bottle. So when I had that reaction from my customers when I first introduced in Bar Hill the Tomcat gin, I knew I needed a barrel of it. So that came in, and I named it Modern Elixir. And the TTV said absolutely not. So it delayed my barrel for few months. So I said, all right, call it Modern Cornucopia then. And that stuck. So that was a really, really nice barrel. So when I brought it to the charity event at Providence Zoo, we called it Pocket Gin because we had 20 bottles of whiskey. So almost 16 of them, most of them were my single barrel picks. So we did it by category. We had bourbons, we had rye, we had Irish whiskeys, those were all my single barrel picks, and then we had some scotches, and we would have had my single barrel picks had my barrels of scotches arrive, but I haven't arrived yet. And then there was a special table of bottles that I donated to the event. So these would be, kind of higher, highly sought after stuff. Like we had a stag from last year. So I used that different events because, you only pour so much. And those you actually had to pay extra money for. So we did all of that. But in the midst of all that, I had I think it was an 8-ounce bottle that I filled of pocket gin. So when I talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm more of a gin drinker. I go, yeah, where's your glass? So taste some of this, and they're like, oh my God, what is this? So it's a really, really nice gin. It has so many different notes in it, and it just feels very healing when you even just smell it. You're already going to get well.
Yeah.
So
Does Connecticut allow you to ship liquor or no?
No.
No?
Well,
Okay.
well, you can ship within the state, but shipping to any other state, it's just problematic.
Yeah.
Right? And then for me, I've kind of built the store as a destination. So I want people to come,
Sure.
right? Because you won't get the same experience. Yes, you can get a bottle of my pick, that's great, but you won't get the experience coming to the store and actually getting to try other things and exploring your palate.
That's cool.
Which you are located in Canterbury, Connecticut. So what is near Canterbury?
Nothing.
Distillery.
And I say there's previously there was more cows than people,
Okay.
right? And now there's no more whiskey bottles than cows in Canterbury. So there's nothing around. It's located in the quiet corner of the state. So there's really not that much going on. There's not even places for people to stay and stuff like that, which
Gotcha.
kind of sucks,
Yeah.
So we'll see. That might change in the not so distant future.
So people in the area are just thirsty.
No. So actually, my customers come from all over the country.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
up and down the East Coast, West Coast. So I have 2 maps in my store, in my tasting room. I put the first one up, I think the first September that we opened, and 20 minutes after I put the map up on the wall, my first customer came from Tennessee. He was on his way somewhere on the East Coast, and he's like, gotta stop in this spot because of the Whiskey Tribe video. That's how, I guess, the word got out there that you guys should all come visit me. So it's pretty much dotted up and down the East Coast, from Maine to Florida. A bunch of people from Pennsylvania moving out. There's a few states not represented yet, and every once in a while I'll point it out. I'm like, who from this state hasn't visited here yet? Then I got people from Hawaii. So pretty much anybody that is trying to come to the Northeast for something will have to sort of plan their trip such that, we gotta kind of go up this way on 395, and it's only a 10-minute detour.
Sure.
And that's kind of true because I found out last August when things were starting to open up a little bit more, and anybody that was going on vacation to the Cape or wherever, or going down to the Carolinas or whatever, they'll always go, honey, we're gonna go to the Cape, but we gotta go up this road here on Route 6, and we just gotta turn south. And so every weekend I was very busy in August because people were on vacation and made sure that I was one of the destination spots. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
It's kind of crazy when you think about having a tiny little store in the middle of nowhere, that people would make the time to come. But apparently they've tasted my single barrel picks and like it enough to keep coming back. So
Love it.
And then outside of the initial advertising, we don't do any advertising at all, right? I don't even have a website. Whatever I like, I put on my Instagram. That goes to my Facebook, and that's it. So
What are those handles?
Whiskey Mentors.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. Whiskey without the E. And, whatever I cook, I'll put on there and I'll show you what I'm pairing with. Sometimes it's a pairing of, sometimes I can't decide because I love wine too. So there'll be a dual pairing night. It'll be a wine and a whiskey, right? And then a bite of the food and a little bit of wine, really, really good. A bite of the food, a little bit of the whiskey, they're equally good. I'll just continue down that path. So
Good for you.
yeah, and at the end of the day, it's really, for me, whiskey, and I've said this a few times before, whiskey and wine are, whiskey is to pickleball. Do you know about pickleball at all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Whiskey is to pickleball as the wine is to tennis, right? Pickleball is very inclusive currently, very inclusive society, a really good people that play, and then whiskey people always share, right? It doesn't matter what level you are, just come join us, right? Whereas tennis, you kind of have to have a little league, a little club, and wine, kind of the same thing. And partly, I think with wine, it's also the nature of the product, right? You open the bottle, you got to drink it all for the most part. Whereas with the whiskey, you can open it, share it, and then share it again next week, and the next week after, or a year later. So maybe that's what kind of maybe creates that culture that way.
Sure. What are the hours of your store?
So currently we're only open from 9 to 7 during the week. In the winter, we'll open 9 to 7, 6 days a week, and then Sundays we'll open 10 to 5.
Okay.
Currently in the summer, we open till 8 o'clock only. Because it's a small town, so most of my customers are trained to come see me during that. I mean, people that come see me by appointment anyway, so unless it's some stray person that stops in, and then my staff very quickly hands them my card. They go, here's her number, call her, text her, whatever it is, whatever time of day. Well, actually, send her a text. If she's awake, she'll answer. So basically there's no filter there. If you send me a text and go, hey, so and so, I want to come visit at this such and such a time, and then I'll say okay. Or you can go on Facebook and book an appointment that I'll have to approve, because between traveling and trying to buy whiskey and stuff like that, and working full time, my work hours are definitely my work hours, and then outside of that I can play.
Sure.
So
cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about before we close this out and get you going?
Yeah, it's almost time, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that's we found out very quickly. Yeah, there's no filter here. There's no breaks here. We just keep going.
I love it. Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, Thank you for sitting down with us. If you guys are going to be passing by the area, go check out the liquor store, because obviously a ton of selection. She's very knowledgeable, knows all about whiskey, so you can probably guarantee that all her single barrel picks are just going to be exactly what you want. And if not, she can put you in whatever whiskey that you would like, based off of your preferred notes. So thank you. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you for doing this.
Bye, Irene.
Bye.